like Superman shaves because he can't use a razor because it would just rip the razor apart, dragging it through his Kryptonian whiskers. And so they demonstrated that he uses his heat vision and a mirror, and he bounces the laser off of the mirror and melts the 5 o'clock shadow off of his face. So I'm gonna
Oh,
do.
so it smells like burnt fucking dog hair in the fucking bathroom every morning.
Oh, I'm not gonna say like. Well, I was just thinking
Not a pleasant smell.
that probably means Superman doesn't do a lot of manscaping. So,
Well, he's got a fucking super dick, so I mean, does if you ain't burning your fucking face, you ain't burning your fucking junk. He's Tony. I'm Mike. We're here to watch the world burn. In this episode, we're doing 1987's Positive I.D.
so well, this is one of my favorite films, and I know that it's a flawed film. There's no way around it. It does not have the strongest performances. Um, but it's got a great story. And this is the reason that I picked this film. And the reason I wanted to talk about this one was this was the movie that really introduced me to independent films beyond horror films. There's a ton of independent horror films that get produced in the 70s and the 80s. This is the first time that I saw something that it's kind of flawed, but it's very forgivably flawed because it's so well written. It has a super strong script and really solid visual storytelling, but at the same time, like, if it had stronger performances, it probably would be remembered as a classic. But because some of the performances aren't quite up to snuff, it loses a little bit of its luster on.
So before we get super deep in this, let's do our usual stuff. Let's talk about the director and our stars and that.
Absolutely.
So again, Positive ID was released in 1987. It was distributed by Universal Pictures. Written, directed, produced. Basically, the whole thing was done by Andy Anderson, who did two other films. He did Detention in 1998 and another film called Interface in 1984. Several of the stars in this film were recycled through those two films. There's only one person that wasn't. And speaking of the cast, we have Stephanie Roscoe Myers.
Mm-hmm.
Nice name. As Julie Kenner, also known as Bobby King. She is not a good actress, and she is the only actor of the main cast that wasn't recycled through his other two movies.
Interesting. I see now. If I recall, like she had a lull in her career, and then she did like a bunch of TV stuff after this, if I'm not mistaken.
There was not much her IMDb. Her IMDb list was significantly shorter than everybody else on this list.
So
by quite a bit. Next, we have John S. Davies as Don Kenner, who is Julie's husband. He also starred in Interface, and he is a solid working actor. He's worked from like the 80s on through like 2010. And he was also in RoboCop, which you watched last night at Garage.
Oh, wow, okay.
He is credited as the chess man.
This guy is really good.
He's not a guy, he's a machine.
So I guess is someone RoboCop? Is somebody playing chess? There may be. I don't know.
I have no.
We'll have to look for that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're gonna have to go dig that one up because I have no idea. I don't recall anybody playing chess in RoboCop, but what do
I don't know.
Memory's the first thing to go, man. So.
Right. Stephen Fromholz as Ray Mercer, who is the bartender in the bar. I forgot the name of the bar. Do you remember the name of the bar was?
I thought it was Ray's.
If you think about it later, we'll throw it in. So he's also a working actor. His probably the most notable thing was he had a little bit role in Cloak and Dagger as the boatman.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have Lauren Lane as Dana, the nosy neighbor, who also starred in
The
Interface.
hot nosy neighbor, the
Yeah,
cougar.
yeah.
So
Oh, yeah, yeah. She's cute, no doubt about it.
she's a
But she was also in Interface too. She's done a lot of TV work in the '90s. Multiple guest appearances on Hunter, L.A. Law, and The Nanny. So
Oh, really?
she's probably the most prolific of everybody except for John S. Davies.
Well, I was gonna say, like, if you're milfy and you're, in your 40s and still good looking, you'll find work because there's not a lot of those floating around out there.
Tell us about the plot.
Stephanie Roscoe Myers, pretty lady. She's just she's charismatic, but she's not a good actress. She does not emote very well, and that's kind of the problem with this film. It chips away at it. If there had been a stronger leading actress in this, like I said, I have no doubt that this would have been an indie darling of a film. But and you kind of get the vibe for that. You get the sense of her limited acting chops in that first scene, because the first scene of the film, they are sitting in a car and they are outside of a party and they're supposed to go inside. And this is the first time that her character has been out or gone to a party since, as you discover, she was raped, and she was raped a year prior to this, and there was a trial, and it was a big media sensation, and they're in the car, they have an argument, they're supposed to go into a party, and she can't deal with the idea of going into the party because she knows what people are going to say about her, and she legitimately is like, there's the circus freak, there's the sideshow, the bearded lady, oh yeah, there's the whore. And when she uses the word whore, her husband like jumps on her. No one's going to think that. And again, that seems like out of time on this one. Like in 2020, people are going to be like, whore, why would anybody think she's a whore? She's a victim. Back in 1987, it was like, oh, did you see how she was dressed? She was asking for it, blah blah blah. That mindset was very prevalent back at that time, and it was not an uncommon thing. So they ultimately don't go into the party, and they go home, and she's freaked out, and you kind of are starting to get peeks at her life throughout this. You find out that, she's still very raw and very sensitive about it, that she did not cope well with the media and the fact that it was a show trial and it got, tons of attention. And she's genuinely depressed. She's, taking sleeping pills. She's sleeping in a room by herself. You find out that her husband sleeps in another room. And after just that little brief bit outside the party, because they never really reveal that they went into the party. I'm pretty sure they didn't. But just going out.
No, they didn't go in. No, they sat out front. They had that brief conversation and drove off.
Yeah, they drove off.
They didn't even get the fuck out of the car. As a matter of fact, one of the buddies goes up to the passenger window and is like, "Hey, you guys coming in? This is for you. You're gonna make it." They had that discussion and like, "No, I don't want to do this. Let's go." So they leave. Yeah.
And she winds up in the shower, basically crying and scrubbing herself raw, and so you're getting a hint at the psychology of what's going on with her, and they give you this they built this foundation on her daily ritual, or what's left of it anyway, and how emotionally devastated she is after being raped. And she's basically going through life in a stupor. She is taking medication, she is sleeping all day long, to the point to where her husband has to pick the kids up from school because she's just waking up. There is this really clever scene in the film, and if you're not paying attention to it, it kind of goes by, but she decides that she's going to cook dinner for her family. And she's watching a cable cooking show, and as she's like cooking this chicken, and there's like all the ingredients that are spread out all over the counter, and the host of the show is, dropping all these sexual innuendos while she's cooking, and it triggers her, and like she, like, they go to her and like, oh, it's a lot of preparation and a lot of this, but don't forget to rub it on the breast. Who doesn't love a good rub breast? And stuff like that.
And the stuffing too.
and the funny thing about it,
you gotta get up in there all the way. It feels funny, but it'll be worth it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's very
very clever, very cleverly done.
It's smart writing, and again, this is like one of those, the script, It's really well done. But then they immediately cut from her cooking to them serving dinner, and she's sitting there staring off into space, and the chicken is scorched, it is black, and the husband's like, oh, this is really good, what do you call this? And she's chicken. So
and the kids, while the dad's trying to fucking pump it up, are like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is some shit.
The looks on their faces are, they absolutely tell you everything you need to know about it. Anyway, so the dinner disaster happens. And the husband, she goes and knocks herself out, and she wakes up, and the husband has had the neighbor come over to check on her, and it's kind of hinted at very early on that he's got a thing for her. She's the good-looking neighbor, and she's very catty.
I think it's more like she's got a thing for him.
I think
I'm sure it's probably like a mutual attraction, but she is definitely the pursuer. She's the aggressor.
Well, I was gonna say she's most definitely the aggressor on this one. But like when she's there and they're talking, she wakes up. She wakes up. God, I keep wanting to call her Bobby, and I know that it's not Bobby. What the hell?
Julie.
Julie wakes up from her drug-induced stupor from the night before, and the neighbor Dana is there, and she's, comes in, sits on the bed, and she's like, hey, Julie, where are you? And she's like, oh, I'm in the shower. Well, Julie comes out of the shower, and she kind of like lets her know, hey, I think you were doing something in there. And, it's all right. We all do it. Da, da, da. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was taking a shower. And she's like, sure, you don't have to, you don't have to hide from me. We're friends and all this. And, don't play the wounded virgin with me. I think part of you kind of enjoyed it because every woman has a rape fantasy. And at that point, Julie freaks out and smacks the shit out of her and is yelling, do you like this?
How did that feel? Did you like that? I bet you really liked it. I bet you really wanted it, didn't you?
Do you like this? Is this what you wanted? And she's like wailing on her, big as shit. And
I cheered and clapped and rooted for Julie in that scene because fuck that bitch.
Yeah.
Julie came in like a fucking smack down.
So it was again, a brilliant character bit. It is absolutely one of those really lets you into the psychology of that character and what's eating at them. And so naturally, after she beats the shit out of the neighbor, people aren't interested in what Julie was experiencing and what was going on with her. Like, oh no, give her a sedative and let her sleep it off. And Dana's playing the wounded, victim, and she's, had to shower and clean herself up, and then she goes home and she calls back almost immediately, and she's like, oh yeah, I wanted to let you know that I forgot my unmentionables there.
So let's paint this up a little bit better. Okay, so after Dana gets the shit slapped out of her, she stays at Julie's house and takes a shower at Julie's house and leaves in a bathrobe.
Yes.
So she
and not only
from the front door back home in front of all the fucking neighbors so they can see Dana parade herself in her bathrobe back home. What kind of bullshit is that going to fucking stir up?
Well, not
Dana
only that,
is a first-rate bitch.
not only that, but as they're standing at the door, she like bends down, and she's wearing a bathrobe. She knows she's right in front of him. She bends down, and the bathrobe comes open, and there's the shot of him staring right down her cleavage. And she looks up, and it's not like hee, I caught you. It's just kind of like, yeah, I know. And since she has that conversation of, well, Julie was talking. It's been a year, I understand, since you two have been intimate. I can't stand to go a couple of days without it. I just go crazy. So she's a catty bitch. There's no two ways about it. What winds up happening is essentially they're sitting down in front of the TV, and a news story comes on. And a news story comes on about a professor who had discovered some gaps in the system on how to get a hold of people's records and create legitimate false identities, and that he had committed just a ton of fraud and had acquired a lot of money through fraudulent means using these identities. And that bit loads the idea into Julie's mind that it's sitting there, but she doesn't immediately jump into it. And again, that's another one of the things that I appreciate about this. It's not until she has a bad day and she gets woken up by a phone call, or startled by a phone call, and it's an unlisted phone number. They've had their phone number unlisted because all the media attention that the rape case involved. But she gets a phone call from the school, and they need a birth certificate so that one of their daughters can start kindergarten that year. And she's like, I have no idea where that is. And the lady tells her, well, just go down to the Hall of Records. Anybody can get a birth certificate. It's only $2. And she's like, well, can you do that? And the lady on the phone is like, well, we used to be able to do it before the budget cuts, but you have to do it now. So Julie decides that she's going to go down to the Hall of Records and she's going to get a certified copy of her daughter's birth certificate. And while she's there, she's like, could I get my sister's birth certificate? And the guy behind the counter is like, yeah, you just need to know, what city was she born in and what was her year of birth, and we can get that and get a certified copy. And she's like, well, what about my mom and dad? And he's like, yeah, we can get them too. And she's like, well, I don't know where they were born. And he's like, well, if you can find out where they died, then we can, it'll be right there on the death certificate. So once you have the death certificate, you can find the place of birth, and then we can get the birth certificate for you. And as it goes, she's basically she's poking around, she's feeling. She's not like, doing a deep dive at the local library. She's asking people, and she's
here's the other thing too, is like she's kind of awestruck by how easy it is to get these documents, and the guy's like, it's public record.
Yeah.
So I mean, anybody can get these documents for anybody. They're public record. The other thing too is the guy that plays the clerk is obviously like annoyed by her fucking questions. Like, come on, you stupid fucking bitch. Here's how it's fucking worth.
Listen, lady, nobody cross-references births and deaths. People move all over the country. They change addresses, names. We can't be expected to keep up with all of that.
Yes.
Besides, it would be an invasion of the right to privacy, for one thing. Keeping those records would be an enormous task and an expensive one. And as you can tell by our lovely Depression-era antiques, that the last ones to receive a slice of the budget pie are the ones in so-called vital statistics.
I know how that goes because I answer a bunch of, for me, dumb questions all the time in my work. So.
Yeah, and
there's plenty of times where in the back of my mind I'm thinking the exact same thing, and I so related to that clerk.
I'm like so convinced that he's not an actor, that he's probably a guy that actually works at the Hall of Records, and they were just like, hey, you want to be in a movie? And he was like, sure, what do I got to do? And he's like, just act like yourself and be fucking annoyed. So, because that's exactly how it comes off. And the best part of it is that at the end of the whole exchange, she's like, here's the pamphlet. It has all the information in it that you need. You can find out anything else. If you've got any questions about this, come back tomorrow. So they handle that really, really well. And this leads Julie to like start thinking, hey, maybe this is a thing. And again, the film plays with your expectations a little bit. So she goes to the newspapers and she starts digging through newspaper back issues, and she's trying to basically find, notable deaths, people that have died. And she's very specific about, well, I want to find somebody that doesn't have any family and doesn't have family in the area or wasn't born in the area. So she compiles a list of people that are roughly, around her age and have, died or are dead. And then she goes and she gets the death certificates and she begins eliminating from there. So because of this, Dana is, again, injecting herself into the family. She's picking the girls up from school, and Julia is apparently doing much better. She has decided that she's going to go back to work at her old real estate job. And this is one of those scenes that she goes to lunch with her former boss, and she's like, I'm ready to get back to work. And this perfectly kind of explains how rape victims were treated back in the 80s, in that her boss is like, oh, well, after all the publicity of the trial, I don't know, maybe, you wouldn't be such a good fit. It might draw the wrong kind of attentions to the business. And she's like, I'll take all the out of town clients. I'll take newlyweds. I'll take the people that don't know anything. So the boss is leveraging her shit situation to basically get a better deal out of it. And she does agree to hire her back.
And then sticks with a fucking check as she leaves.
Yeah. And that's the exclamation point on that whole conversation. But it's so slimy. But at the same time, it's one of those, oh, I don't want to cook you when you're down, but let me put my boots on real quick.
Right.
That's exactly how that whole scene plays out.
There's another clever thing about this too, is that the reason why she got her job back is because she knew she'd had to travel. So it's an excuse for her to do the things that she needs to do.
Yeah. Well, as a realtor, not only does she have to travel, but she's constantly like, oh, I got to meet with clients. We got to go through the closing paperwork. It gives her the window. It gives her she can get out of the house. She's not around people that she knows. It gives her the ability to say, hey, I'm on an appointment. So again, well thought out, well crafted, well structured. So Julia goes and she's got her birth certificate. And you see her and she's done up and she's in a wig and she's in a makeup and you think that they're taking her photo for, hey, why'd you do it? Why'd you do this? And if you hadn't done it, we would not have, done, this. I don't want to spoil too much about that one, but then it immediately cuts away and you realize she's getting a photograph for her new driver's license. And it's under her new assumed identity, Roberta. And, the cop basically says, well, if you'd used your blinkers, you would have got a perfect score on your driving test. Yeah. And, she has her new driver's license and she actually flies to Miami and they plant this one early enough. There's a second identity that she has established. She has, Julie has created Bobby. And then there's a third one that's unnamed, but that's the one in the blonde curly-headed wig. And she goes to Miami and she flies using that persona. So I think that the notion is that it's kind of a stress test. She's going to see if her, this third fake identity flies. If she gets busted when she goes and gets a plane ticket and flies in and out of Miami, is that going to cause any red flags? And if it does, well, then she hasn't burned the Bobby ID, but she rips her husband off, and I love this bit in the film. She tells her husband that she's looking for something to kind of occupy her time, and she found this beautiful vase, and it's $2,500. And
hey, if it's over $2,000, it's not a vase.
It's a vase. I'm sorry.
Mrs. Kenner, when it costs more than $2,000, it's a vase.
But she tells him all about this vase or this vase, and that she wants to get it, and she takes the check and goes and she buys the vase, and then she goes and finds a knockoff of that vase for 35 bucks, I think is what it was. Yeah. So and it's really funny. So then she immediately takes the original vase and she pawns it. And for her, when she's buying that vase, she's told, oh, well, you could most definitely get what you paid for it. And she goes to another antique dealer to sell the vase, and she only gets $1,800 back out of it. But again, they don't waste time. There's not exposition. If you can't figure it out, she bought the vase so that she had a receipt for it. She buys the knockoff so she has something to show her husband, who isn't ever going to know any better. And then she sells the original vase so she's got $1,800 to do with what she wants. And again, very clever. And they don't bother like explaining what she's doing. If you can't piece it together, that's your tough shit. You're just going to keep rolling. So she puts the vase, because it's only 35 bucks. And she talks up, isn't it
beautiful?
What is it?
husband's like, yeah, it's great, honey. What a wonderful vase that you have.
It's fake.
It's like, oh yes, indeed. And she goes and she opens up a savings account or a savings checking account, whatever. She goes to the bank and she's going to again stress test her ID, and she uses Bobby this time, and she opens up a checking account, and then she immediately goes on a shopping spree after putting money in the bank. And they give her, this is back before ATM and debit cards, so they give her starter checks, and starter checks have her name printed on them. They look just like a normal check, and as long as you had an identification piece, most places would accept these checks. And so she goes and she buys a bunch of jewelry, which she then pawns. And she's bouncing checks.
Not only that, but she also discovers too, like if you go to certain stores, if you apply for a credit card, you get a percentage off. So then she's got credit cards that she's racking up as well.
The best part about that, and this is kind of important, is that she comes home after being gone for 4 days, and the house is a wreck. So, she's just thinking, well, my husband's a slob. He didn't clean up after himself while he was gone. And she goes in and she starts picking up the house, and she notices the trash can is overstuffed. So she starts taking trash out of the trash can, and she finds the champagne bottles and the disposable glasses. And this is when she realized that her husband has crossed the line, that he has been unfaithful to her with Aunt Dana next door, that fucking trashy, trollopy whore. God, Dana's so hot. Absolutely. And then she goes and she buys her cream puff 1977 baby blue Mustang II. And
was it a Mustang II or was it a Pinto?
It was a Mustang II.
Was it? I don't remember.
I'm sure it was. If I'm wrong
a piece of shit.
If I'm wrong on that one, it's because the Mustang II and the Pinto were styled so similarly, but yeah. I'm pretty sure it was a Mustang II. Because I remember that it has cream puff written in shoe polish on the window, and she pulls up in front of this bar, and the thing breaks down, and she gets out and beats the shit out of the car and says, "Cream puff my ass." Yes. And it's such a spectacle that the people on the sidewalk stop and applaud her after kicking the shit out of the car. So she goes into the bar for the first time. And what is the name of the bar? It's kind of.
I don't know. This is a good point for me to stop for a second. I got pissed again. What is it?
Saul's. SOLS. Saul's Bar. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have the bit where she then is driving her cream puff Mustang. It breaks down in front of the bar. And the name of the bar is Saul's, as we've just discovered. And she goes in and she sits down at the bar, and she asks for a beer, and it's sitting there just with her beer, and is immediately called to the back table by Mr. Tony. And
well, hang on. Roy, who we're first introduced to right there in this scene, the bartender, says, "This is from the guy in the back, and I suggest you go."
Yeah. It says Mr. Tony would like a word. Yes. And so she goes back, and it's basically spelled out that it's a mob bar, that, and she asks, I thought this was Saul's place. And he responds, well, I let Saul think it is. So, he's a mob guy. He spells out that, he has a lot of guys on parole there. And because of that, they can't have any seedy characters in there. So if she's a working girl, she needs to go somewhere else. And again, just for her, from a character standpoint, she's thinking, okay, nailed it.
Yes.
But and she does look like a upper line escort. She is overdressed in a shitty bar. Mm-hmm. And so that's everything that goes along with that is again visually played perfectly. But she reassures him, look, my car just broke down, and I just want a beer on a hot day and just to calm down. And he's like, well, then if that's the case, then your drinks are on the house. And she pushes it because she wants to see just how attractive do people find her. And she's like, well, how about one of those pizzas? And he's like, yeah, sure. And she's like, well, how about a new car? And it's set as a joke, but she has figured out that, she's got the look right. People are eating out of her hands. They're never looking past the pretty face. That's all they're seeing is she's the pretty girl at the bar. And through the next portion of the film, she's like, she knows her husband is having an affair. She is using her job as a means to kind of, you know, figure out where things are. She's definitely making some purchases on a empty bank account with her starter checks that the bank so generously gave her, and she's building relationships with people in the bar. She's become a regular there for a while. And you also find out that somebody has been following her. You don't see who it is. You just see her car will be going back, and she has a couple near misses where, you know, she almost gets caught, gets busted. She's clever enough to talk her way out of it. She falls asleep in her shitty hotel, and, you know, she has to go back to the parking garage and pick up her green Volvo and change clothes and get her makeup off, and then go to another shitty motel, make a phone call from there and be like, hey, honey, I thought we were going to close on the house, but they didn't like something in the contract, so the deal fell through. I'm sorry, I forgot about the time. I'll be home in, you know, a few minutes. And it's perfectly structured to where, yeah, she's playing with fire. She's a little out of her depth on this one. And she kind of starts getting better around the house. She actually starts cooking, and the meals aren't burnt to a crisp, and she's doing well with the real estate job, and all that is going well. And the film is kind of like, at this point, you're like going, she's escaping the identity of the raped suburban housewife. She's using Bobby, and she's, you know, seen as someone who's not a victim. And you know, if the film had stopped here, it would have been an okay movie. You would have definitely got it. And right here, stop right here. This is the timestamp. If you continue to listen,
not yet. We still actually there's actually still a little bit more we can cover real quick, because there's one spot in the bar, and this kind of goes as a character building moment where you can tell that she is 100% at this point, like, over the rape thing. She is very comfortable in her skin now again. Because she is propositioned by a guy in the bar that sells was it Souls?
Souls. S-O-L apostrophe S. Souls.
But being propositioned very, very aggressively.
Yeah.
And she handles herself quite well. And Roy, does he kick the dude's ass? What the hell does he do? I think
he
Roy
smacks him upside the head with the butt of a shotgun.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and there's some good character moments between her and Roy. They have a very good relationship going on.
Yeah, it's
friendship.
I was gonna say it's solid chemistry behind those two characters, because you most definitely get the notion that they like each other, but they're kind of keep things a little bit at a distance just in case. So it's just kind of, it's very much, you know, that office crush that you know, you like them and they like you, but you've got shit going on outside of that, so you keep it at this level at all times. And again, it's handled really well.
And there's one other key scene in there too, where there's a party going on, and I don't know if it's a New Year's Eve thing or some type of holiday.
It's a birthday party. It's a birthday party for one of the patrons of the bar, and while he's getting all these gifts given to him by the bar regulars, and Bobby has most definitely become one of the regulars, and one of the sluttier girls walks up with a bunch of Polaroids and says, I just took these, happy birthday, and hands them to him. And he takes the case like, oh, wow, yeah, I'll hang on to these. And then he turns around with a Polaroid and he snaps a photo of Bobby. And it's a straight, clear photo of her. And she realizes, okay, this is the kind of thing that I could be identified by. So she sneaks out of the bar and she waits for his drunk ass to be walking down the street. And she beats his ass and mugs him and takes the photos and takes, you know, empties out his wallet. She has found a lot of really interesting ways to make a lot of money on the side. So that happens. So she makes sure that no one has a photo of her, and then she sneaks back into the bar, and someone comes in and goes, oh, you know, I want to say his name's Paulie or something like that. He's been mugged. He's outside, something like that. It's not important what his name is. What's important is the links that she'll go to make sure that nobody can identify her from photos or anything like that. There's another bit that goes on during this time, and her and her husband go out to a party somewhere.
Yeah.
And they come back home, and the house has been rolled. Like literally their bedroom has been torn apart, all the jewelry has been stolen, and all that. And you later see her pawning all that stuff. so she's getting both sides. She's got an insurance claim for the theft, and she is got the money from the pawn shops that she's collecting. Here's the funny thing about this, and this is why I really appreciate the script in this film. That evening, like, the husband is like, oh, I can't sleep in our bed, I can't sleep on our sheets, they touched him. And it's a metaphor for her rape. He never identified with what happened to her and what she was going through, and his choice was to stick her with a doctor and who pumped her full of drugs and just hope that she would get over it sooner or later. And yet here he is, and he's been violated in kind of a similar fashion, and he can't get over the notion of somebody else having touched their bed sheets, that they have to be thrown out because he can't deal with the idea of sleeping in that bed anymore. So it's really clever. It's really
very, very
smartly
well
done. She tells her husband she's going to a realtor thing, and she goes to her apartment in the city, and she stays there for several days. And one of those days, she is there at the bar with Roy. And Roy asks her if she's eaten, and she's like, do you mean, have I eaten today or do I eat? And he's like, both. And he basically invites her out for dinner. Let's go out and get a bite to eat, after we close up. And she's like, well, I'll see if I can wait until you close up. And the minute that she says yes, he's like, all right, last call, bar's closed. And the guy in the background goes, it's only 8:30. And he's like, if you'd like, I'll make it final call and throw you all out. So they cut to that. They go to one of the greatest restaurant scenes in a movie ever when she asks, he asks her, so what'd you think? And she responds, well,
You want my honest opinion?
Oh, sure.
The food was terrible. The wine was like vinegar. And the service sucks.
I know. That's why we could get a table on such short notice.
well, the wine is shit, the food is shit, the service is shit. It's this raw, real moment. And I don't want to quote it because it's so damn funny in context, but she's been building herself up. She's like, trying to hey, Roy, how long have you been a bartender? She's been practicing this conversation in the mirror, and she gets there and she loads the question up and she asks him, how long have you been a bartender? And she's like, does it matter? I mean, does it matter what I did before this? Does it matter what I'm going to do after this? I mean, I don't care about any of that. I don't care about your past. I'm not going to ask you about your past. Don't ask me about my past. We've got now, and now is okay. And it's like really genuine and authentic and kind of sweet and kind of exactly what she needed to hear. So he invites her to, walk her back to her apartment, and Roy's a gentleman. He doesn't push it though. He
doesn't push at all. No.
He does not push at all.
He's
He knows
cool
there's
the whole
something
entire
going
time. On. He's totally playing cool. It's like, whatever you want to do, we'll do.
She walks inside and turns around and says, well, aren't you going to come in? And he says, well, I will if you ask me. And she's like, oh, come in, Roy. And she is explaining my apartment is the best I can do right now. I'm trying to get money together for something nicer, blah, 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 blah. She does have bourbon, and they have this, real brief conversation, and it all ends up with, if I asked you to go, would you? They've both been drinking, they've been flirting, and she asks, if I asked you to go, would you? And he says yes. And she says, well, if I asked you to stay, would you? And he says yes, but not too enthusiastically. And then there's this cut to a scene where they're having sex, and he has her against the wall, and it's almost kind of weirdly brutal looking. You're not sure
It looks rapey.
what's going on.
It looks
very
at
rapey.
first.
And then it immediately cuts to the flip to that shot where they're on the opposite wall and she's the one being very rapey. So it is very consensual. Now, this is all built
very cleverly done.
It's again, the craft is impeccable in this film. And then they wake up and she's naked, he's naked, they're both under a blanket. And for the first time, we really get to see the aftermath, because as she's getting dressed, you see the horrible gashing scar on her breast, and you see the horrible gashing scars on her leg. So, you know, you're finding out that, no, this is not just a normal rape. She was cut up. She was mutilated during the course of this rape. And for Roy as a character, I'm sure that was just kind of like a, whoa, didn't see that coming. But I'll assume that he played it completely cool, because Roy's a cool motherfucker, and that's all there is to it. So, okay, so now is when, if you don't want this movie spoiled, if you're planning on watching it, skip ahead to this time code right here and pick it up, because everything past this point is spoiler territory. She's cleaning up in the kitchen, as I recall, and she's watching the TV in the kitchen, and it comes on the news that the guy that raped her cut a plea bargain deal, and that he was supposed to serve several years, but he's getting out after only 7 months of all this. And he's decided he's going to, you know, drop dime on the mobsters. That's part of the plea agreement, that he's going to help the organized crime task force, and that's why they're letting him out after serving only 7 months of his sentence. And her husband is devastated, and she's just kind of got that whole, well, life goes on thing going on. Again, spoiler, you find out that the reason that she rolled the house and she stole all the jewelry and pawned it was so that she could buy a handgun from somebody, and it was she bought it from a private individual, so there's no tracing that gun, and she keeps it in the freezer with the meat wrapped in tinfoil, because she's the only person that ever goes into the freezer for anything. Again, visually excellent, really well told. And then on the day that the guy that raped her is supposed to get out of jail, she calls her good dear friend Dana to come over and keep her company. And this is I love how this is done. Is, you know, she invites Dana over, and she's sitting there and she's pouring 2 glasses of orange juice, and she's like, look, I know we've had our differences, but, you know, I think that we should just kind of talk about this stuff and clear the air, if you will. And you see Julie go over to the refrigerator, and she opens the freezer, and there's the gun wrapped in tinfoil in the shot. And then you immediately hear this loud crack, and you find out that it's Julie, and she's just banging the ice cubes free from the ice tray from the freezer. And she's loading up the orange juice that she just poured for her and Dana. And she offers Dana the orange juice and talks about how, you know, they can, you know, kind of get along better and this and that. And it immediately cuts to her blue Mustang pulling up on the curb. And it's February 14th. It's Valentine's Day. And Bobby gets out of the car. And she goes into the bar, and she walks over to Roy, and she goes, "Hi, Roy, happy Valentine's Day." And she hands him a Valentine that's hand signed. So she has her excuse for being in the bar, and it's really clever. And she can kind of see the look on his face, and he's delighted to see her and all that, and that gives her everything that she needs. And then Mr. Tony calls Bobby to the back of the bar, and Bobby goes back there. She goes, just be a minute. And she goes to the back of the bar, and Mr. Tony goes, "Hey, this is my nephew, Salvatore. He just got out of the joint. He's been gone." And Salvatore stands up, shakes her hand, and goes, "Hey, wait, don't I know you?" And she pulls a handgun out, and she shoots him. And she doesn't shoot him once. She doesn't shoot him twice. She blows the shit out of him. I mean, she shoots and shoots and shoots.
She unloads that magazine.
No, she does not unload the magazine, because she then walks over to the bar, and she points the gun at Roy. And she shoots directly over Roy's shoulder and shoots the whiskey bottle out. And then as she's walking out of the bar, she shoots down to get everybody the hell out of her way. She wants to make sure everybody is good and panicked and nobody knows what the hell is going on or what the hell just happened. She wants everybody screaming and freaking out. They cut back to Roy behind the bar, and Roy had the shotgun in his hand. Roy was going to take care of business, but Roy opted to not take care of business, and that's what the gunshot over the shoulder was. Bobby knew he would have the shotgun, and that's because of the scene earlier where she is accosted by the guy that's trying to get a date with her. So she goes out to her car. She drives back. She gets the makeup off. She goes back home, and she takes the orange juice glass out of Dana's hand and replaces it with another glass with just about the same amount of orange juice, getting rid of the evidence that Dana was drugged by her. And then she goes upstairs and takes a sleeping pill and falls asleep in bed. So she can claim complete ignorance about everything that has happened at this point. And she wakes up, and her husband is watching the news, and the news story breaks that Salvatore was shot dead, and her husband, being Mr. Tough Guy, is all like, I'd have shot him myself if I had the opportunity. And she's all, I know
dear. I know you would have.
Yeah. And then we come to the last few minutes of the movie, and I love this because she goes outside, and the news vans are pulling up. And one of the reporters...
Hang on. You missed something. Because as they're watching on the news, you see Roy. And they're like, there was an undercover cop on the scene. Here's Officer so-and-so, and it's Roy. And he's like, yeah, I don't know exactly what he says, but he's like, I really don't know who the hell...
Yeah, I was here as part of another investigation. I was behind the bar. I didn't see what happened.
Yeah,
that's pretty much verbatim what he says. And then he's like, yeah, you know what? Just get out of here. And he goes and he gets in his car. What you see is the blue car that's been following Julie all this time. But this is the part of the movie that I appreciate the most, and this is the movie that really like cemented this in my head for all these years. Is she goes outside and she gets rushed by the reporters, and one of them runs up and goes, "How does it feel that the man who raped you was murdered? How do you feel about that? Does it change anything? Do you feel better?" And her response is no. It doesn't change anything. And she goes back inside. And when she goes back inside, she goes up and she kisses her daughter, who's asleep. And her daughter rolls over and goes,
Morning, Aunt Dana.
and that's kind of it. That's the straw right there. So we immediately cut to the third ID that Bobby had created, and she's at a truck stop, and she walks over to a phone booth, and a truck pulls up to the phone booth, and then the truck drives away, and when the truck drives away, the phone booth is empty. Julie has disappeared. She has gone. And it's an amazingly effective ending, and it's, like I said, it's just one of those movies that saw it accidentally on cable years and years ago, watched it several times during its cable run, have really enjoyed it ever since then, and never could find it on media. Recently found it was an out-of-print DVD from the Universal Vault collection. I guess that's the reason why no one's heard of this fucking film, is because they fucking tried to lock it up and bury it. So, now you had never seen this movie before.
Never seen it, never heard of it. It's a great story. It's a really good story. It is super solid. And thank God it was super solid. Because the first 15, 20 minutes of this film is painful. It's extremely painful. Her acting, Oscar Mayer's acting is not good in the beginning of this fucking movie at all. And neither really is the supporting cast. They're barely passable. But the story is so good. So once that ball gets rolling, like once you start to see her develop these IDs, it's very compelling. And you get wrapped up, you get invested in her. And what I love about the most is when I was watching this, I was like, okay, so she's gonna come up with this alternative life, and eventually she's just gonna dump her family, and this is gonna be her new life. You know, won't go fucking hang out in bars and do this type of fucking thing or whatever, and just become like a scummy kind of criminal type of person, I guess. And then we get the shocking ending. I'm like, oh, oh, damn, that was fucking good. Holy shit. Nice, you know. Well done. Well fucking done. But you gotta get past the act in the beginning and the first 15 minutes. And I don't know what Andy Anderson's obsession is with girls in robes. Because what's her face is in a robe for the first 15 minutes of the fucking film, but that wasn't good enough. He had to have fucking Dana in a robe as well, too. So he must have some weird fetish with girls in showers, which is weird because I would have thought for sure we would have had more nude scenes of girls in showers, but you just had Oscar Mayer in the one scene.
Well, and the showers, it's shot from outside the shower, and the glass is steamed up, so you can't actually see what's inside. But the thing that I again, going back to the craft of the film, because of how he chose to shoot it, and because when you do finally get the reveal of what had been done to her when she was raped, when you do actually get to see the scars, and they're big, fucking ugly scars.
Yeah. It has good impact when you finally see it, yes.
You get to appreciate the brutality of what she's dealing with, but it wasn't spoiled in the first 5 minutes of the film, because that would have been the easy way to do it. If it had been played for sympathy and you had seen that she'd been, mutilated and raped, then you would have just been going along with it forever. But again, you have her husband, who he's the sad guy because he hasn't, busted a nut in a year, and they're sleeping in separate bedrooms, and it's weird that because of how she as a character is portrayed, all these secondary characters are more sympathetic, but then as more of her personality and her character and her past are revealed, they're less sympathetic and she's more sympathetic. So it's this perfect sliding scale that when you finally get to the end of the film, it's just everything that you started off, every preconceived notion you had when the movie started has been flipped over, and it's been done with just really great storytelling. So
the storytelling is great. I would love to see this as a remake. With better actors. It doesn't have to be anything high budget at all. It doesn't require it. The story's good enough on its own. But I would love to see better actors in here.
So are you recommending this movie?
You gotta make it through the first 15 minutes. If you make it past the first 15 minutes, yes, I recommend it. But if you can't get past the acting, sorry. So it's not a wholehearted recommend. It's a soft.
But it is a recommend. You know what? I'll take it. I'll take it.
I'll say this. I like the movie. I like the movie a lot. I really do. It's just gonna be hard to find somebody else that I know to really watch this movie and to enjoy it. Like a casual movie person. I don't think we'll make it past the first 10, 15 minutes. If you're a movie aficionado all day long, watch this movie. You'll love the story.
So I was gonna say this is not a movie for passive moviegoers. And again, this was the movie that really stands out to me as far as the first real independent film that I saw that was just kind of like, what the hell is this? I've never heard of it. Don't know anything about it. I don't know any of these people in it. We'll give this a shot. This was the movie that I enjoyed it so much it made me seek out a lot of obscure cinema, if you will. So this is Genesis for me, because when this movie came out, I was 15. So that all being said, this movie had an impact on me, to say the least. So, Mike, what are we watching next?
Next, we are watching Kids in the Hall, Brain Candy. I'm excited for this film. This film broke a lot of ground. Kids in the Hall in general broke a lot of ground They're the Canadian Monty Python of the 90s is the best way to describe Kids in the Hall. And it's the best way to describe the absurdity you're about to see in the next episode.
So until next time.
See you guys.
Peace.
You know, if you ain't burning your fucking face, you ain't burning your fucking junk.
I don't know. I don't know.
But he does have a flaming bush, then.
It's
if you're burning your fucking whiskers off with your fucking heat vision, you're setting that shit on fire. You have a flaming bush. All right?
The religious symbolism is overwhelming.